I'm running for president because of a thought that the parents here in this room have had, but we have been afraid to express. And it is this: our kids are not all right. They are not all right because we have left them a future far darker than the lives that we have led as their parents. When 78% are living paycheck to paycheck, 57% can't afford an unexpected $500 bill, and then you say, hey, start a business? They're like, what are you talking about? I can barely make ends meet. I'm not going to start a business. To automate away 4 million manufacturing jobs, which we did, those workers would move, get retrained, reskilled, find new, higher productivity jobs, and all would be well. But when I dug into the numbers, it turns out that almost half of those workers left the workforce and never worked again. And of that group, about half filed for disability. And then you saw a surge in substance abuse and drug overdoses and suicides, none of which were in my economics textbook. Here are things that are at all-time lows: getting married, starting a business, having a kid, moving for a new job. Invest in our people, then our company will do better. In the public space, we have the opposite approach. It's like, do not invest in anyone. And then we end up paying for it anyway on the back end when they wind up in our jails or emergency rooms or shelters. You're very likely to graduate with tens of thousands in school loans, because that's now the new norm. We're up to $1.5 trillion in student loan debt. And then you're going to graduate and say, there's going to be a good job waiting for you. Oh, wait, 94% of the jobs are actually temp gig or contract jobs. Because right now we're burdening so many of our young people in particular with life-changing debt that they will never get out from under. And these people should be starting families, buying homes, starting businesses, and doing things that move our society forward instead of paying off this debt for decades. So this is rough, because if you look at the numbers, the number of entrepreneurship programs at schools has more than doubled over the last 20 years. And during that time period, the rate of business formation among young people has gone down by 50%. And we talk about the 70s to now. Income growth has stagnated for many Americans from the 70s to now in real terms. And the last 3 years, we've seen this declining life expectancy that's hand in hand with a surge in suicides and drug overdoses, which is a sign that at least some Americans are experiencing the lack of productive opportunity much more sharply than having access to cheap consumer goods can somehow make up for it. We have the smartest engineers in the country turning supercomputers into slot machines and dopamine delivery devices for teenage girls. That is the problem. And we need to wake up to the fact that it is not immigrants that are causing economic problems around the country. It is the fact that technology is pushing our economy to a point where more and more Americans are going to have trouble getting by. That the freedom to trade your labor for money to make a good living for yourself, that's actually going to end up breaking down in more and more situations. The Democratic Party used to be very, very heavily aligned with working class Americans. Yeah. And there's now some kind of pathology that if the person who's suffering is a white man of a certain background, then the suffering somehow is somehow diminished. Like it doesn't count as much if they're a trucker. I mean, if you look at the suicide rate, it's particularly pronounced in 50 to 54-year-old white Americans, which are the population. I mean, you resemble that. That's me. Yeah, that's you. Which resembles a population that right now is just reaching a point where they're like, hey, my job skills don't have any, utility in the marketplace. And then they go home and they just start looking around and being like, what am I doing? The market does not have an intrinsic interest in unemployed cashiers or unemployed call center workers or unemployed truck drivers. To try and safeguard the rest of the country from this broken down system that is on the verge of pushing us off this precipice, but after which there will be no coming back. And you can all feel it. According to a study that was published in The Guardian a number of months ago, median African American net worth is projected to go to zero by 2053. We're at record high levels of GDP, also at record highs in this country right now. Suicides, drug overdoses, anxiety, depression, financial insecurity. It's gotten so bad that our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years in a row. Last time our life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row, the Spanish flu of 1918. We should not fear to have our kids in school or go shopping or be out in a public place and fear gun violence. So if you have the feeling that our fellow citizens are getting less reasonable, less rational, less optimistic, and more subject to bad ideas, they are. Because that is exactly what you would expect if you can't pay your bills. And right now, only 6% of American high school students are in vocational or technical tracks. In Germany, that's 59%. What we have to do is we have to focus on fixing the system that is distorting and dehumanizing various people, turning them into economic actors. I'm going to suggest that these two things are linked. Because if you go to people and say, hey, we need to worry about climate change, a significant proportion of them will say, I can't pay my bills. The penguins can wait. We talk about it like Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom. He's a manifestation. What's come up earlier today is that almost 2/3 of the victims of gun violence are the owners themselves. If we all had a self-destruct button on our wrists where you just press it and you disappear, a lot of us probably would have pressed that button at some point in our lives. But the problem is we're overselling college to all these kids. We're like, hey, if you don't go to college, your life is over. And then they go to college, they get this debt. Even if you come out of college right now, you know what the underemployment rate is for recent college grads? It's 44%. As we're sitting here together, the labor force participation rate in the United States is 63.2%, the same level as Ecuador and Costa Rica. I mean, at this point, what's happened is you had this OxyContin addiction that has morphed into fentanyl and heroin, right, which are frankly more accessible and sometimes less expensive. A high school student in Iowa who said to me, his classmates have fentanyl patches on their arms, they're already addicted, what are we going to do? And I realized that those teenagers would never seek treatment because it's an illegal substance. And one of the examples I use that my wife is at home with our two boys, one of whom has autism, and the market values her work at zero. Studies clearly show that we're seeing record levels of anxiety and depression coincident with smartphone adoption and social media use. You had more opiate prescriptions in the state of Ohio than people in the state of Ohio at one point, and that was on the government's watch. And then we somehow hold individuals accountable for becoming addicted when you had companies that profited to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. Well, if you look at the backdrop, we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and those communities have never recovered. Where if you look at the numbers, half of the workers left the workforce and never worked again, and then half of that group filed for disability. Now, what happened to the manufacturing workers is now going to happen to the truck drivers, retail workers, call centers, fast food workers, and on through the economy as we evolve and technology marginalizes the labor of more and more Americans. Dream is dying by the numbers, where if you were born in the 1940s in the United States, there was a 93% chance you were going to be better off than your parents in terms of socioeconomic mobility and earnings. In the 1990s, if you were born in America, that's down to 50-50 shot, and it's heading in the absolute wrong direction. You are right now fighting that fight. And the question I want you to ask yourselves, are you winning or are you not winning? And if you don't think you are winning, then think about what would help you win. We have to change the nature of the game. One of my rules in entrepreneurship and life is you have to give yourself a chance to win. Not lose less, not hold on for a longer period of time, but actually win. That's why I'm running for president, Tucker, is I think it would be insane to just sit back and watch this automation wave overtake our communities and our economy. So we're not ostriches, we can get our heads up out of the sand. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one in Washington, D.C. will touch this because fundamentally this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way we will do anything is if you were to create a wave in the rest of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And that is why I'm with you tonight, Iowa. Instead of this GDP measurement that's running us off a cliff, we should be measuring our shared progress through health and life expectancy, mental health and freedom from substance abuse, clean air, clean water, childhood success rates. This is a vision of an economy that would actually work for the American people. I'm proposing the freedom dividend, which is $1,000 a month for every American adult starting at age 18. If you pump $1,000 a month into that neighborhood, it ends up creating a whole new rung of opportunities for the people in that community. It will recognize the kind of work that my wife does, which right now the market values at zero. And we talk about empowering women all the time. $1,000 a month would go much further to empower women and allow millions of women to walk away from exploitative and abusive jobs and relationships. just like that. The proposal is we give every American $1,000 a month free and clear, and that doesn't somehow usurp your labor, your time. That actually, if anything, liberates your labor, your time. That if you have a little bit more freedom from scarcity, then you can start making moves towards the sort of work that you want for yourself, that you value, that you would find fulfilling and exciting. We should move towards social and emotional learning in high schools, emphasize things like team building and the arts and problem solving, and things that frankly they can't look up on a smartphone. And try and prepare them for financial literacy. Imagine high schools where every 18-year-old gets $1,000 a month, and then you teach them financial literacy the first semester of their senior year. That's where number 3 comes in, which is where you all come in. So I am championing the freedom dividend, the trickle-up economy, from our people, our families, and our communities up. An economy that works for us, and an economy where instead of us serving the numbers serve us. We need to reconstitute meaning for many, many Americans. I just want to close by saying that the data shows that 2/3 of our educational outcomes are determined outside of the school. That's parental time with the child, words read to them, stress levels in the house type of neighborhood. So if we want to give our kids a real chance to learn and our teachers a real chance to teach, we would put resources directly in the home and people's families. If you want to help students start businesses, it would be really easy. You just give them money, or at minimum, you forgive their debt. If you put a mechanism in place where the American people get a tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Uber mile, then we can pay for $1,000 dividend for the American people. Some of that money goes into religious institutions. Some of that money goes into nonprofits. Some of that money goes into arts organizations and cultural organizations. And then you end up giving people an opportunity to at least start to address that new sense of structure and purpose and fulfillment and meaning. I want you to think about what $1,000 a month would mean in our communities. It would mean stronger families, higher graduation rates, lower stress levels, less domestic violence. It would start to recognize the work that's actually being done in our communities every single day. Would create millions of new jobs, would supercharge the arts, creativity, volunteerism, culture, and political engagement. This is the trickle-up economy, from our people, our family, and our communities up. Most profoundly, how many of y'all are parents? I'm a parent. Most profoundly, imagine being able to look your teenage son or daughter in the eye and say, starting at age 18, you will receive $1,000 a month from your country. Because your country loves you, your country values you, and you are just as American as everyone else. That helps give the entire nation a new way forward, and gives me and millions of parents around the country the ability to look our children in the eyes and say, with truth in our hearts, your country loves you, your country values you, and you are going to be all right. I'm not running for president because I fantasized about ever being president. I'm running for president because I'm an American and I'm a parent, and I can see the country we will leave to our children, and it is not something that I'm willing to accept. Put the money in our hands. 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 Can we afford it? Yes. Will it cause inflation? No. Is it awesome? Yes. Is anyone trying to make it happen? Yeah, that guy.